The letter had been sitting in my nightstand drawer for 3 years, 8 months and 11 days when I finally opened it. I know the exact count because I had marked the day it arrived. In the small calendar I kept by my bed, a single pencil line through the date, and I had watched the days accumulate around that mark every morning since. The way you watch a wound that isn't healing. I recognized David's handwriting the moment I pulled it from the mailbox. 48 years I had known that handwriting, since he was 7 years old, learning to form his letters at my kitchen table. Even now, after everything, my hands knew it before my mind fully registered what I was holding. I stood in the hallway for a long time with the envelope in both hands. You have to understand what preceded that moment. 10 years of silence, yes, but the silence itself was the easy part. What came before the silence was the decade that made it necessary. The borrowed money that was never actually borrowed, just taken, quietly and repeatedly, from my wallet, my checking account, places I had trusted him with access to because he was my son, and I believed for far too long that love was sufficient protection against certain kinds of harm. The lie he told my sister that had fractured a relationship it took me 4 years to repair, and then the final incident, which I still don't describe in full detail to most people, not because I am protecting him, but because reliving it costs me something I am no longer willing to spend. I had made the right decision. I know I had made the right decision. My counselor had confirmed it. My own body had confirmed it. The way my sleep returned in the months after I changed the locks. The way the persistent anxiety that had lived in my chest for years simply lifted once I stopped waiting for the next crisis. The decision had been necessary, and it had been correct, and I was not ashamed of it. So I put the letter in the nightstand drawer, and I went back to the kitchen, and I finished my coffee, and I told myself I was not ready, and I believed it. The first year was manageable. I was busy enough. Volunteer work and a book club and the gardening. I had taken up the spring after the estrangement with a fervor that was clearly therapeutic, even if I never said so out loud. My friend Gloria asked me once, delicately, whether I thought I might regret not reading it someday. I said I didn't know. I said some things were better left sealed. She nodded and changed the subject, and I loved her for it. The second year was harder. I don't know why. Nothing changed, nothing external, but I found myself thinking about the letter more often, constructing versions of what it might say. New David. I had known him his entire life. The handwriting on the envelope had been careful, deliberate, the handwriting of someone who had taken time over it, not dashed it off, in a moment of desperation. That detail lived in me in ways I tried not to examine too closely. By the third year, I had almost convinced myself that not opening it was a form of wisdom. I had protected myself for this long. I was stable and peaceful, and I had rebuilt enough of my interior life that the absence of David had become, if not ordinary, then at least livable. I told myself the letter was probably another version of the apologies he had offered before, the ones that had been real enough in the moment but hadn't held, hadn't changed anything, had simply lowered my guard for the next crisis. I told myself that reading it would only reopen things that were finally, quietly healing. I was wrong. I was right to protect myself. I was wrong about the letter. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning in October. A voice I had never heard before, careful and trained for exactly this kind of conversation, telling me that David had died. 48 years old. Cardiac event. Rapid. The caller was sorry for my loss. I sat on the edge of my bed after the call ended, and I felt grief arrive in a proportion I had not anticipated. Sharper than the estrangement had led me to believe it would be, as though 10 years of distance had preserved something rather than diminished it. I felt it the way you feel the cold when you come in from outside, all at once, all over. I opened the nightstand drawer that evening. I didn't read the letter yet. I just took it out and held it and let it be real in my hands. 3 pages, I could tell by the weight. He had written 3 pages. 3 weeks later, I read it. He started by telling me he was not writing to make excuses. He started by saying he expected nothing in return. Not a response, not a visit, not forgiveness on any timeline other than my own if it ever came at all. He said the only reason he was writing was because he needed me to know something true, whether or not it changed anything between us. Then he named things, not generally, not in the soft, easy language of apologies designed to relieve the sender, but specifically the money and why he had taken it and what he understood now about the thing inside him that had made him capable of that. The lie he had told my sister, the specific damage it had caused, and his understanding of why he had told it. The last incident, which he described with a precision that told me he had been sitting with it for years, not running from it. He told me about the therapy he'd started. He told me about the 18 months of work it had taken just to arrive at an understanding of his own behavior that he wasn't ashamed to put on paper. He said he had not written sooner because he had not been ready to write something true, and he had decided that if he was going to write to me at all, it had to be true, every word of it, or it was not worth sending. Near the end, he wrote something I have returned to many times since. He wrote that he was not asking to come back into my life. He said my right to that decision mattered more than his desire for a different answer. He said the only thing he needed me to know was that the person who had hurt me was not the only version of him that had ever existed, and that he was profoundly, specifically, irreversibly sorry for the years he had spent being the wrong version. I read it 4 times that morning. Then I set it down and sat in my chair by the window and cried in a way I hadn't cried in years. Not just for David, but for the 3 years the letter had spent in my nightstand drawer while he was alive and had already said what he needed to say while I was alive and might have heard it and had some kind of choice about what to do. Next, people ask me if I regret not opening it sooner. I tell them the truth, which is complicated. I understand why I didn't. The protection I was offering myself was real and earned, and I am not interested in punishing myself for it. The therapy that helped me survive the estrangement was the same therapy that had taught me the value of that protection. And I was applying a lesson correctly, even if the outcome was painful. But yes, I regret the 3 years. I regret not knowing what he had become. I regret that the window during which I might have had a choice closed without my awareness while I was busy deciding I wasn't ready. The letter lives on my dresser now, in a small wooden box I bought specifically to hold it. I moved it there deliberately. I see it every morning when I get dressed. I chose to make it visible. I share this story because I think the lesson in it is not the one people expect. The lesson is not that you should forgive everyone immediately, or that protecting yourself from harm was wrong. The lesson is about the difference between protection and postponement, between a sealed door held shut with genuine wisdom and a sealed door held shut with fear you've learned to call wisdom. I did not know David had changed, but I also did not try to find out. And now I am a woman, sitting by a window in October with a letter from her dead son, reading words that came too late, not because he wrote them too late, but because I opened them too late. And those are not the same thing, and the distinction matters. And I wish with something close to everything I have that I had understood it sooner. Don't put it off. Not because the person who hurt you deserves access to you before you are ready, but because time does not wait in a nightstand drawer. It moves without asking, and it doesn't come back. And there is nothing more permanent or more silent than the moment when the chance you thought you still had simply, quietly runs out.